Hey, this is Tobin Wagstaff. This is a 5-minute drum lesson discussing flam interpretation. So a flam is essentially two notes that you play very close together. And if you have a musical background, you might be familiar with grace notes. Grace notes are the little notes that happen before the big notes. So when you play a flam for drums, one hand is generally high, the other hand is lower. They don't hit at the same time. They hit at slightly different times, but very close together. So when I'm talking about flam interpretation, what I'm really talking about is how close is the little note to the big note. So if I'm doing a right-handed flam, that means my right hand is high and my left hand's low. Now I'm playing traditional grip, but you can do this match grip, it doesn't matter. So if I had very open flams, they might sound like this. If I had very flat flams, it might sound like this. Flat flams are something that you might play in a group of other drummers. Flams are going to sound fat to begin with, so if you have a bunch of drummers playing fat flams, it's going to sound really thick and potentially dirty or messy. If you're playing them flatter, it cleans that up a little bit. But if you're playing by yourself, you definitely want to hear a flam sound, so you don't want them to be too flat, because that doesn't really sound like a flam. That sounds like a flam, and the word flam is falam, like it sounds like a falam. Falam. Now, if it's too open, to me, I don't like that. That's not a very good flam to me, because it sounds like a rhythm. Ba-dum, ba-dum. So I'm not a big fan of that. I'm more of a fan of somewhere between flat and somewhere being open, where you're getting a true falam kind of sound, but it is really close together. It's a grace note and a big note, or an anchor note, sometimes I call it that. So if I played something with flat flams in a context, it might sound like this. If I played something with open flams, it might sound like this. If I played somewhere in between, sorry about that with the camera. So in my opinion, I think flams that sound between open and flat is really the way to go. They sound like true flams, and even though I'm just playing this on a pad, this is how I approach it on any percussion instrument that I'm playing on. That's just my opinion, but now you know that there's different ways to interpret flams, and of course, if you can play them open and if you can play them flat, there's a whole range of in-between that you can cover, and that's all sort of personal preference. But between being open, between being flat, I think is where you want to be, and that's my little discussion here for flam interpretation. And whether you play flams in marching percussion or concert percussion or drum set, the way you play them will be different. In marching percussion, they're generally flat because you're playing with a bunch of other people. In concert percussion, you're playing them not flat, not open, somewhere in between, the way that I'm kind of doing it now, and that's my preference. If you're playing drum sets, sometimes you might play a big fat flam, meaning that it's kind of open on snare drum for hits and things like that. So that's not a bad thing. It's just all sort of a preference deal. So visit me at my website, tobinwagstaff.com, or facebook.com/tobinwagstaffmusic, or subscribe to my YouTube channel at youtube.com/tobinwagstaffmusic.